Hey y'all, my name is Tamra Andress. I am your Fit and Faith podcast host. I'm pumped to be here. Just me, no words, no scripts, no intros, no outros. I love authenticity. I hope to breed vulnerability. And I usually do this alongside another dreamer, mover, shaker, entrepreneur, passionista is what I love to call them. If you're a dude, then a dude. But I am loving just coming together in community with other people to share their high and low stories, to share their journeys to comeback, because I believe ultimately that's where God would have us. He would have us on the mountaintop. And even though we learn a ton in the pit and in the valley, God would want us right now, especially in this season of life, in this time of our culture, to shine. And so here I am. I want to teach you how to shine. I want to be alongside you when you get your glow. I want to catapult you into your calling, whatever that is. So this isn't a fitness podcast. This is not a religious banter, though we preach Jesus all day long. And this is not just about nutrition or health or wealth, though I like some green, and I know you do too. It's not okay for us to not be okay with talking about all of these things in unison. You guys, we don't just need a mental health podcast. We don't just need a fitness podcast. We don't just need a religious, spiritual podcast. It needs to blend. This is what Fit and Faith is all about. It's all about creating alignment, connectivity. It's about pursuing your wholeness and claiming it over your life and over the lives of the loved ones that you have around you in your community. So thank you for tuning in. I would love to get to know you more. You can like, review, subscribe, whatever it is. Send me an email, DM me. It's me. I have an amazing team alongside me, but you guys are getting me for now. So enjoy. I'm so pumped to have a coffee conversation with you, is what I'd love to call them. Don't have my coffee right now, but I have it in my system, as you can see. All the love. Let's do this together and keep going for your dreams, y'all. But we are here today. It is Friday. I hope everyone's having an awesome day. I am pumped and energized, literally, because I knew that there was going to be an energy outlet in the room today. But I am, for the first time, I think, ever. I always talk about how this is just like a loose coffee conversation, and I'm always drinking water. I never drink coffee at this hour, but Jacqueline and I were just talking about how we've had a long week.
Yes.
And so I'm happy to end it with you,
Me too.
even though it's not really over. We have some fun things going on this weekend, so
Absolutely.
We'll have to talk about that. But I'm so pumped to introduce you to a new friend of mine. I feel like every time I get on here, I'm like, oh, I have a new friend. Y'all, I have lots of new friends, and it is so amazing to have this networking experience this year that is unlike anything that I've ever done in my entire life, especially connecting with women.
You've been busy.
Oh, it's been so good though. Like having eye contact with people like this is just such a special treat. And so
Agreed.
The first time that we got together, I just loved that you were so invested. You're incredible at eye contact.
Aw, thank you.
But the way that you just come into a room is just really empowering to me, which is so
Aw, thanks.
perfect for your empowered mind wellness, entire brand. So you guys, this is Jacqueline. She's going to teach us. She's going to laugh with us and hopefully not cry, but maybe. We never know where it's going to go.
Don't make me cry.
I'll try not. But yeah, so how about you tell them, I'll let you introduce yourself because you are your own expert, but what it is that you do, and we'll kind of share about how we got connected and what that storyline looks like for you.
Sure, yeah. Hi, everybody. Excited to be here with my friend Tamra. So what do I do?
Yeah, what do you do?
Well, to put it in a nutshell, I like to call myself a meditation coach, a mindfulness and breathwork facilitator. And those are really the core offerings that I provide at Empowered Mind Wellness. Really, Empowered Mind Wellness is based on 3 pillars that when practiced together, foster our ability to live more skillfully. So that's the goal.
I love that.
And there are 3 main buckets. The first one is what I would define as the heart and soul bucket.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has to do with learning how to be more compassionate with ourselves. I find that, and research actually backs this up, you know, a lot of us really aren't very kind to ourselves, unfortunately. Whereas we would go out of our way to be, you know, loving and kind to someone who we really care about, a dear friend, a relative, oftentimes the voice in our heads doesn't offer the same kindness.
So true.
So I feel like that's really a foundational piece of what I have to share.
That's amazing.
And just a little bit of self-disclosure here. I've, you know, wrestled with a pretty icky inner critic at various points throughout my life. And I found that when I started to get really curious about what that voice was saying and, you know, what its goals were for me, I discovered that underneath that, there was really a lot more happening.
That's intense.
Yes. And, you know, most oftentimes I think people will discover that this inner critic is just so afraid that it's actually trying to serve as a protector of some more innocent part of ourselves.
Yeah.
So anyway, there's that.
So good. Before you even continue, I have to tell you the story that keeps like running in my head really fast because I just heard it a couple weeks ago at the Rachel Hollis Rise business event that she did. And I think it was her. She was talking specifically about this. And you're going to we hear about this inner critic, the voice in your head, the enemy, there's so many different things that people do. Half the time when people are talking about the enemy, it's literally ourselves. Like we've created that enemy. And so whether or not it's the devil, it's really just your own version of your own devil, which is really scary. But she said, imagine that you are standing in your house and someone knocks on the door and that you open the door and they start saying out loud to your face all of the things that you tell yourself on a consistent basis. You're ugly, you're fat, you're not worthy, you're not pretty enough, you're not smart enough, you're not capable enough. He could never love you that much. Does he even love you? Do you love yourself? I mean, anything that goes through our head, right? And those are all things that I've said to myself. So that's why I can shoot it out really quick. You're not a good mom. You're not a good sister. You're not a good friend. And so if this person came to your door, right, and they're pointing at you and they're yelling at you, you, of course, I do not do well with confrontation. And yet I can confront myself all the time internally and handle that situation now. But 3 years ago, I would have not had the resource tools to do what it is that I'm able to do. So this person's yelling at you, you're immediately feeling belittled. Maybe you're a feisty one and you're able to come back at them.
Most often though, we shrink back.
Right. And then she said this key point that I will never forget is now, not only is it just you in the room, your child is standing next to you. At the door with this person yelling at you, saying all of these horrible things. And I mean, it was a room of 6,000 women and everyone was silent. Because those are the moments, and I would never allow somebody to speak to my child like that. Even if it's directly to me, around me, I would be like, excuse me, like let's work this out. There's something that or I'm going to shut the door and you're gone. And we would so easily, especially if they were talking to our child about that, if they were pointing at my daughter and saying, you're not worthy, you're not pretty, you're not well, you're not, you know, whatever it be, we would go buck wild on somebody, right?
Absolutely.
So mindfulness and really focusing in on the heart and soul and having that person, being able to shut that person out. There are so many resources to be able to do that. Some that come to mind, Stephen Furtick has a series called Crash the Chatterbox. Amazing. And Ron Carpenter has one called Detox, and it's all about your own inner battle, your own critic. So I am excited to hear more about that heart and soul space with your breathing and mindfulness.
Yeah, sure.
So that's the first bucket, heart and soul.
Yeah, heart and soul. And before we move on, I actually just want to share a little bit more because you know, of course, jogged some things in my mind too. I mean, I haven't heard about either one of those resources, so thank you for sharing. You know, I think that when you spoke about that part about would you let that same type of bully talk to your child that way? The answer is absolutely not. And over the course of my personal journey, I found that one of the most healing and reparative things that I could have done for my heart was actually inner child work. And
Totally.
years ago, when I heard the concept of inner child work and inner child meditation, I, kind of stuck my nose up at it and had some judgments about it. And I think I just wasn't ready, to be honest with you. But as I got more deep into my personal meditation practice, I found that I was actually able to do self-guided inner child meditations. And a lot of that was really about reparenting my inner child that maybe didn't get the love and affection that she wanted at various points throughout her life. Yeah. And it, that's not to say that my parents didn't do a good job, because they're both amazing people. Yeah. But nobody's perfect. Exactly. And they really were doing the best job that they could at the time. Yeah. And so, this little girl maybe didn't get everything that she needed in certain moments. And as an adult who is capable of providing that, I was able to go back in and sit with her and, hear what was on her heart and mind and spend a lot of time with her and reparent her. And that's really a luxury, and it adds so much juiciness to a meditation practice because, when we talk about things like mindfulness and breath work, I'm a real big believer that if you can feel it, you can heal it. And I think that one of the common, misconceptions about meditation is that, you sit down and you boot off into some otherworldly place right? And you just go from, you bypass the pain and you go right to the bliss. Right. And actually, that's called spiritual bypass.
Wow. Yeah.
And at one point, it was really attractive to bypass all of that inner noise, the inner critic, and a lot of the pain points. But, when I took the time to sit with her, my young child version of myself, I got to hear what was on her heart and mind. That wasn't bypass. That was 100% attunement, present.
That's so good. And you have to be so present with that, because otherwise you shut it out. And I think that's the biggest problem of why people come to face such grandiose things, even as what might not seem grandiose to other people, but things like postpartum or regular depression or anxiety. Those things are such tag words now that people are like, oh, I suffer from that. Well, it's a true, real thing. Yeah. It is a mental error, and that we have the ability to go back and fix. And I've never thought of it from that perspective of reparenting that little person. But so often through everything that I've worked through in my own personal therapy journey, that's exactly what you're doing.
That's where it comes from.
That's exactly what you're doing.
That's where those core beliefs are established very early on in life. Yeah. And you wouldn't think it, because obviously we don't have the same cognitive capacities at age 3 as we do at age, let's say, 25. Right. But
yeah, it's just wild. And I think really honing in on the fact that it's not a lack of parenting, because I think my parents as well, when I was walking through this, there were some times where I had to put a separation between our relationship that was really close forever and is now regrown and reshaped into such a beautiful thing. But for a while I was I need to be alone with this. I need to understand this pain. And I was originally angry towards them. Mm-hmm. And then as I came into my own experience of motherhood and the things that our parents, our individual, anybody is going through 1,000 things at any given moment.
Absolutely.
And they, like you said, are only able to do the very best version of themselves for that specific hat that they're wearing, which is your mom, which is your dad.
Right.
You don't know the other 999 things that are happening in their lives. Nope. And even as an individual person, I came to realize that half of the things that occurred and the reasons they occurred had actually nothing to do with their lack of parenting, but my lack of being upfront with my own emotions during those seasons. So my being, a teenager, and you're dealing with whether it's bullying, whether it's confidentiality, whether it's trusting of a friend, whether it's broken heart, all of those things, I didn't run to them and express and explain all of those emotions. Oftentimes you're shutting them down so that you can move on to the next thing without ever addressing them and letting yourself heal from it.
Right.
Jumping into the next relationship, whatever it be. And it seems so medial when you're 14 years old, who would think to even address those things, and your parents surely aren't going to do it, because that's a big birds and the bees combo that I never had, right?
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to know that you have access to that. And I want people to hear this so wholeheartedly, that if you take the time, just like I said, the rebirth of your own self, of that own little girl, that you then get to parent one day, even your own self, like looking in the mirror, you are beautiful, you are loved, you are worthy.
Right.
All of those things become affirmations because you truly believe them, not because you're coaching yourself to believe them.
Yeah. And I mean, it's really simple. We all want to, be loved, and we all want to belong.
Yeah.
And, I think that to the person who is considering undertaking such a practice, it can feel contrived at first. If we've been, if we've had an audio cassette tape playing with the same messages going on and on and on for several years, sometimes it takes a while to dismantle those habitual thought patterns. But with consistency and with self-forgiveness, which I believe is really the first step in any transformative process, and consistency, it's totally so doable. Yep.
So, we've only touched the first bucket, so we still have to go through the other bucket, but I have to know, like, when somebody says, or somebody is like to the point where they're like, okay, I want to confront this. I want to sit down with you and have this experience from a coaching perspective. I know you do group breath work and group meditation. I mean, that has to be so like vulnerably personal.
Yeah, I think that there's a time and a place. Yeah. I don't know that I would necessarily unpack that at the same. I don't know that I would necessarily unpack that in a group setting, right? Yeah, that's more individualized.
And it's going to be different in like length for everyone too, right?
Yes,
like,
it is.
I mean, because everyone's variation of how long has that audio cassette been playing,
right,
is drastically different.
And a lot of that can, feel very shameful to admit in a room full of people. Yeah. Usually, in the workshops, the group dynamic is typically close, and people feel more connected when they leave than when they came in.
Absolutely.
But still, I'm a big proponent of not oversharing if that is going to compromise a person in an unhelpful way.
Yeah, that's really good. That's good insight right there.
Yeah.
Because I think that oftentimes, especially from like a biblical standpoint, is like we're called to share our testimony. And so people will be like, okay, I'm supposed to share every single thing that happened in my life. Everybody needs to know. And that isn't actually the premise of what God is asking us to do.
Yes.
He's asking us to do it if it's helping somebody else. And so it's not something that you need to stand on stage and go share with the world. This happened to me, but Jesus. It is, let me walk you through what occurred and how Jesus has brought me to this new healing place. Mm-hmm. And so it'd be similar to walking through this meditation practice, and you then later being able to, you have to do this. You have to meet that inner child in order for you to come into that new rebirth place. So I think that that's so powerful, because so often we do that, and then everyone knows everything, right? And it's not to say that that's a terrible thing, because if you've already confronted it, you've already, self-forgave yourself, and the people in your vicinity have done the same. There's healing in that. Mm-hmm. I just truly believe that there is also so much covenant to relationship, and even that relationship with yourself when it comes to shame or guilt or any of those things that could be burdensome to you later down the road.
Yeah. So you shared based on more of a faith background, and for me, for those of you who you probably don't know this about me, I trained as a therapist, a clinical therapist. Okay. And so, a lot of my thinking on this, is probably biased in part by my training. Sure. I'm not practicing therapy now, but, I just look at it as, we don't dishonor ourselves by sharing when we're not ready. And I think that especially in the age of self-help and, the popularization of vulnerability, that can send some mixed messages to those of us who are like, I'm so ready to heal, so I'm ready to spill my guts and get it all out. Right. And then it's kind of like we, do the walk of shame.
Totally.
In some instances, if we haven't had the time to process and sort of come to a neutral place within, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, I love your angle on it, and I think that there's so many different angles to view that process of, feel it to heal it, and share it and be vulnerable. I just think being vulnerable with being skillful in our vulnerability is important. And that's part of the mission of Empowered Mind, is to live life more skillfully. And I love the definition. There's one definition of yoga that's defined in the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah.
And it's defined as yoga is skill in skillful alignment in thought, behavior, and speech. And so when we talk about skillfulness in that way, when I think about how we as human beings express ourselves, it's having mindfulness and wisdom to know how much we pour out into the world, right? About our personal story. Because if it's not time, then it's not time, right?
Right, absolutely.
Self-disclosure can also come in phases too.
Very much so. Well, just like self-identity. I mean, anybody who says that they've like found themselves fully, or they like fully understand who they are, I think that's a becoming process, because I know every single day I change. Right. And they say, what is the basis of like every 7 years, like you actually have like DNA change.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
And so like parts of your like entire internal bones and everything will shift. And so to know that like there's so much change constantly happening, I don't believe that that's like a coincidental thing. I think it's a knowing process that we have to be aware of and step into that, versus being fearful of who am I becoming, being aware that you're becoming, hopefully, the better version of yourself.
Right. Yeah.
The stronger, more in tune, more aware. And so self-identity is truly the whole piece of your practice, being cognizant of your emotions, being cognizant of your breath, being cognizant of where your mind is going when you come into this place of peace.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, it is. You said something that, made me think about how meditation is such a wonderful tool for that.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's so many different styles of meditation out there.
Sure.
So I don't want to get too far in the weeds with all of that, but absolutely, I think that it's one of the best tools for coming to better know our inner landscape. And of course, the inner landscape includes exactly those things that you're talking about: thoughts, emotions, sensations, even, how we hold our body in space, how we breathe, our habitual breathing patterns, getting to know our tendencies, understanding what that audio tape is playing over and over and over again in our minds. And also even maybe catching glimpses of our future self as well in the process. Yeah. And then, of course, there are, insights, inspirations, intuitions that drop into in the practice. But, before I get too far ahead of myself.
I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't write fast enough. I take notes because I know that there's like so much that's happening. I want to be so present. And so I just sinks in further. So thank you for sharing so much.
Yeah, sure.
So I feel like let's go to bucket 2.
Yeah.
Did we touch on it already?
Well, we're kind of like in bucket 2 now.
Okay,
yeah. Okay. So bucket 2 is awareness cultivation, and that's a broad category, but it really does caption meditation and mindfulness.
Okay.
Yeah. And basically, there are so many different ways to train our minds and get to know ourselves better.
Yeah.
And when you were speaking a bit about, self-identity and how we sort of morph and shift every 7 years and, maybe even every 7 seconds.
Yeah, totally, 100%. No question.
Under some circumstances, that's really the goal behind bucket number 2.
Cool.
Is knowing ourselves.
Yeah.
And, I think that it's interesting. Meditation can be undertaken for so many different reasons, and what motivates people varies. Yeah. Some people do it for the spiritual aspects of it. Right. I know that that was really one of the main draws for me, was to feel closer to what I would call God.
Yeah.
And one of my other teachers refers to, the, how do I say this? The aspect of God as like a higher reality.
Yeah.
So, I don't want to leave anybody out, whether
of course.
Whether you call that higher reality God, Jesus,
Sure.
the kingdom of heaven, universe, divine love.
Yeah.
I mean,
I love that.
Yes.
I think that's an important part to like be starting on, is because this is an introduction to so many people, right?
Yes.
And this is an introduction to that space or that person or that being where they would have never otherwise known. Because I do believe that, obviously, you guys know my beliefs, that there is a higher being, and that higher being is the creator of yourself. And so being in touch, in tune with what that is and what that looks like to you is your open gate to exploration of the magnitude of what this universe brings to us.
Right.
And that's where, of all things and all knowing, is the belief system comes into play, that you are constantly becoming, because the universe in and of itself is constantly changing. And if you don't evolve, which we know through evolution, whatever it is that you believe,
yes,
we've done a lot of evolving. And so if you're stagnant in any part of your mind, in any part of your heart or your space, you're not going anywhere on the next train.
Or it's going to be incredibly painful if you're you're gripping in with everything you have to stay exactly where you are, right?
It's so good.
Resistance is painful.
Yes. Have you met Jeannie? Have you met Jeannie, who does Elements of Life coaching?
I haven't. No.
I've got to connect you to, because it really, this makes me think of like the mindset of flow.
Yeah.
And being in that space of flow with your body and your mind and your soul, and being able to like roll with the dice, roll with what's coming next. Because if you can't get into that space, this spiritual space is essentially the exact same thing.
Yes. And you know what? Rolling with is, I think, one of the key elements of a successful meditation practice. Oftentimes, what a lot of people contend with are either attaching to something, maybe like attaching to something that is coming up in the future, or creating things in their meditation practice, right? Because they think, oh, well, I'm supposed to be having this experience. So they're attached to the way they think it should be, right? Or, on the opposite side of that coin, we're pushing away, we're resisting, like what you're saying, pushing away feelings that come up that we don't like, or that we don't think are attractive, or we think maybe I shouldn't be feeling like this because I'm meditating. This isn't what a good meditation looks like. And then, of course, there's that judgment piece, right? Well, if it doesn't look good, then I must not be doing it right. There's something wrong with me. And that kind of gets back to bucket number one, right? Where did that message of I'm not doing a good enough job come from? So, self-compassion and mindfulness really do go hand in hand.
And I think too, with that, and this is a huge concept and topic being shared right now anyway, is that concept of comparison.
Yes.
Because every single person's journey is going to be drastically different through this process.
Absolutely.
And so like I can pick your brain all day long and tell me what it's like for you. But until I actually sit down and do it, it's no different than reading the Bible. I could read 3 of the exact same verses. You go in and you're like, Tamra, that is not what I got out of it. And that's amazing. That's so good that we're all different. We have a unique fingerprint with purpose.
Right. Yeah. And I also, think that what you said about, evolution, I view meditation even as a co-creative process. And what I mean by that, let me see if I can break this down. It's really interesting. We live in a culture, right, where we're so defined, and it's ingrained in us from very early on in our lives to achieve and accomplish. And it's a lot about forming a self-identity and, expressing it out in the world. But it's really based on, what our achievements are and our titles and everything. So, that's really very opposite of a lot of what the meditative traditions are all about, which is the complete opposite, dismantling the ego. Like if I'll just fall back on yoga again. I'm also a registered yoga teacher, and I've studied yoga philosophy for years, and I absolutely love it. But the saying is that ignorance, is sort of the root of all of our suffering, right? We're not really, like, our small reality is not really
the actual
reality, right?
Yeah, totally.
And so when we get kind of crunched down into this manufactured reality that's a creation of our projections and how we were brought up and our life experiences, our core beliefs, then from that, there's this sense of I am that forms, and that I amness can get us into a lot of trouble.
Okay, well, technical difficulties, such is life.
And our screen went black when we realized we lost power. So we are back in action, and I have not forgotten, and Jacqueline has not forgotten where we were. So we're on bucket 2. We're talking about evolution, and keep going.
Yeah, evolution, meditation, and I think I was saying something about how the root cause of all of our suffering is ignorance, right?
Yes, so good.
And that there's it's just so interesting how in the world we live in our country anyway, the U.S. and I'm sure other places in the world as well.
Sure.
It's all about what we accomplish and what we achieve, and our identity is really formed around our all of that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then on the other hand, a lot of the guidance that comes from the Eastern meditative traditions, for instance, talks about completely dismantling the ego. And so on the one hand, here we are trying to maintain this sense of I am, this is me. And then on the other hand, if we're following this set of guidelines, it's really about forgetting who you are,
all of it,
right?
Yeah, all of it. And then there's that sense of equality that comes into play when you're in this mindfulness space, right? Because anybody can walk into the room. That comparison is out the window. They are just another being in your space, wanting so eagerly to get into their space of whatever it looks like for them.
Right.
And I love that. And I feel like that's on such a hugely different level, but the whole reason that I created the opportunity for people to come in for retreats to rid themselves of all identity pieces. We are all in one space, away from our home, away from our spouses, away from our job, away from our children, away from anything, any hobby, any car, anything that identifies I am.
Right.
And you're coming to the table all in this authentic form and saying, I showed up. And so what is it that I'm supposed to be experiencing it? And it's my favorite thing.
I love group work too. Oh, I love it too, good. Because, often when a group of people get together and they've never met before, there is that sense of, well, this is my space and this is your space. Yeah. And really this is where we tap into more of the relational field of mindfulness. And it does it does encompass that equal playing field concept that you speak of. But as the group sort of morphs and changes over the course of the day or the hours spent, or if it's a retreat, it could be much longer than one day, right? A lot of people actually find that they're way more similar than they are different. So, here we are all wearing our bodysuits. And yet, when it comes down to it, even though my joy and your joy might look different out in the world, its joy is a raw emotion, right?
So
one that we all have experienced. Your sorrow might look very different than my sorrow playing out on a storyline, right?
So true.
But same thing, we know what that raw feeling is.
It's the point of empathy that you're met with each other to be able to say, I get you.
Yes.
I understand you. I haven't lived in your shoes, but I've walked it out too.
Right.
Because everyone has experienced every high, every low, just in their own forests, their own experience. And I think that that's such an amazing piece, and why the concept even, so I'm going to go into church again here, but they have denominations and you have all these different houses of people that come and experience their thing. Is probably similar to yoga. Okay, we're all experiencing this practice and I go to this yoga house because of this, but there is the experience and the expression of if they could all just break down any of those titles and come together. And that's what retreats are. That's what breath work does. That's when you're having this mindfulness experience. People come from every walk of life,
right? Man,
woman, to me, my favorite is the ethnicity and cultural background piece, and sharing that space is
absolutely
absolutely incredible. It's
yes.
my favorite thing.
Yes.
And so like seeing all of those different things come into one, and people transforming from strangers to sisters in a matter of 3 days. I mean,
yes.
it's unreal.
Yeah, I agree. The diversity piece is huge. Yeah. I'm doing a 2-year training with 2 well-known meditation teachers and Buddhist psychologists, Tara Brach and Jack Kornfield. Cool. So I've practiced meditation for probably over 12 years at this point. And just last year I decided, maybe I'll just move forward with a certification cool. And, do a certified meditation teacher, whatever, CMT, whatever, whatever that is. Speaking of like achievements and titles and everything.
No, but I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
I think it's more of just like the practice of the fact that you are continuing your knowledge base in it and continuing learning. I mean, if we stop learning, we've also stopped becoming.
It's really true. One of my teachers, says that the day you stop learning is the day you start dying. Really.
It's so true.
Yeah.
It's so true. And I can see that just from the outside looking in on so many different people in my own life. And like it's so transparent on even their happiness level. Like it just becomes like stagnant. Like
going back to that stagnation.
Reached this point, and there's like everyone talks about the plateau in your exercise, right? And like, oh, I've reached this plateau. I cannot get over this hump. I cannot lose the next 5 pounds. I cannot feel like better. I can't reach the next goal mile time. And it's because you've hit a plateau because you're doing the exact same thing.
Right.
And so shifting.
Yes.
And learning something new and jolting your body and your brain into something new is when you now achieve the next level of success.
Yeah, stepping outside of your comfort zone is another way of saying it.
Totally.
And I mean, I think that, same thing goes with a formal meditation practice. I mean, there are ways to practice. You can practice informal mindfulness throughout your day, which I'm also a huge proponent of. And I can talk about that in a second. Yeah. But then, the formal practice of actually devoting a set time every day and sitting down and doing whatever your specific practice is. Yep. There can be peaks and valleys in that whole process as well. Yeah. And, the idea is to just stick with it, acceptance, because our natural inclination is to resist it or, to get bored. That's one of the major stumbling blocks that a lot of meditators face. They're like, well, here I am. Now what?
Yeah, right. I've done it. I've achieved this ability to bypass or like that point. I love that bypass spirituality. But I think my question would be, and I think there's another bucket that we want to touch base on too, is like quieting your mind, right? Mm-hmm. I can go into my prayer closet and I can like focus on the Lord and I can, read my scripture and like try and be so incredibly present.
I had a friend that had a prayer closet. She called it a prayer closet too. Yeah.
Like what that means.
She's at seminary school right now, actually.
I'm not, but I love it. And then like even just like being present in our conversation right now, like trying to just like block out every single other thing. My phone that's vibrating in my lap, is it my teacher, is it my child, is like what's happening, but also like being really present right here. I also have to go to the bathroom, but that's a whole other So like where and at what point, and I know this is a thing all women have, how do you quiet your mind? Like where does that start?
Well, I'll have to say that that's one of the most common myths about meditation is that our minds are, supposed to just shut off and everything's supposed to get quiet up there, like flipping a light switch on, off.
Come on, Jacqueline, I need this.
And that's just not how it works.
Yeah.
We all have minds that wander and, that's really how the mind is designed. Right. And, there's a whole bunch of science. I don't want to really make this all sciencey though. Sure. But, the short answer is that if you expect to just plop down and have a quiet mind, you know what? You may spontaneously sit down one day and just have a really quiet-minded meditation practice, right? And then there are other times, probably more often than not, where the mind is just going to wander here, there, and everywhere, right? Because we've got to-do lists. We're constantly thinking, doing, planning ahead in the future, thinking about the past. And it's a lot more rare that we're here in the present now. So going back to what I was talking about a minute ago about informal meditation practice or informal mindfulness practice, I'd say that one of the ways to quiet your mind in formal meditation is to practice informal mindfulness in daily life.
Okay.
And so really what that boils down to is pouring all of your attention into one task.
Okay.
And I love what one of my teachers says, Swami Rama actually says, do your work with love and devotion.
Mm-hmm.
Because, oftentimes we do our duties. Life is filled with duties. Absolutely. I mean, that's not going away until the day that we die.
Yeah, exactly.
And we sometimes we do our duties and we're like, yay, this is great. I'm going to go do this. I'm excited about it. But like, I think more often than not, we're like, oh, I've got to go do that. I don't want to go to the grocery store. Do I really have to drive across town here and then go there for my kids, whatever?
True.
I mean, we love our kids, right?
Yeah,
but
of course.
There's a lot of.
I want to go to tutoring again.
There's a lot of.
go do something else. Okay.
It requires a lot of energy, right? That
people
have jobs that might feel unfulfilling, and they might huff and puff as they commute to work. But when we do our duties with love and devotion, really with a higher intentionality is what it all boils down to. Then not only are we almost like offering it to a higher cause, which sounds cheesy, but I just encourage people to try it. You'd be surprised. But we also are kind of we're holding ourselves to a higher standard as well. And so when our mind starts wandering off here and there and everywhere, it's kind of like the Polar Star that keeps us on track. And so for, a devotional person, that might be something that he or she considers.
Right.
But just everyday plain language.
Yeah.
When you're doing one thing, don't pick up your phone, even though it's tempting.
Yeah.
Don't, text, don't surf the internet, don't scroll through social media.
Yeah.
Just focus on one thing at a time. And then when you sit down to actually practice meditation formally, you're priming your mind to be more focused.
Yeah. That's really good. I think that's super important. And I think something that somebody could easily take away from this conversation, be like, okay, if I'm going to take one thing, I'm going to do this. I'm going to try it. I'm going to practice it. So I love that. So where are we now? Bucket 3.
Bucket 3, yeah.
Okay, what is it?
There was like an awesome segue to go right into breath work earlier.
Okay.
But we're flowing just like the breath, right?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. So, bucket 3 is about relaxing the body. It's all about physiological relaxation. Mm-hmm. And, I think a lot of people, we are such embodied beings that a safe place to start is certainly relaxing the body and really even cultivating body awareness. And, the breath is, of course, within the physical body, right? And, the pranic field is also outside of the physical body too. Yeah. But for the purposes of this conversation, suffice it to say that that third bucket, breath and body, are kind of intertwined. And, I started practicing breath work, 12 years ago, maybe. Yeah. And I approached the practice because I was kind of at a crossroads in my life. Yeah. I had experienced anxiety, for years. Yeah. And anyway, at this crossroads, I was just not really fulfilled in a lot of areas of my life. I was in a crappy relationship at the time. I had a lot of unfulfilling relationships in my life at that time. Yeah. I had a good job, but it was like, it was okay. Yeah. I definitely wasn't taking my own advice that I just gave previously.
So good.
I was, it was like a wah-wah.
Yeah, have to do this.
Yeah, have to do this type of mentality around work. Yeah. And, I was suffering too. Yeah. I just wasn't living very skillfully. And a friend of mine had suggested breath work, and I thought, I'll give it a shot. And she recommended a teacher. And so I went, and wow, I mean, that's really what put me on the path of transformation. Wow. And I think one of the reasons that it was so easy to see the benefits so early on is because the breath is something that's with us all the time, right? It's not like we have to contrive that. It's just there. And it's a fascinating area of study because, the breath is a conscious and an unconscious process.
Right.
And really it's the only function of the body that we have conscious control of. But then if it's left to operate of its own accord, it can do so without us micromanaging how it moves and flows.
How interesting. I never thought of it like that.
Yeah. So, that's where we could go down a rabbit hole of using the breath really for personal transformation. But at the very least, it's certainly a wonderful meditative anchor. And then when practice in more of a breathwork setting where the breath is intentionally manipulated and changed, it can, lead to some pretty profound healing.
Really insane. I know it's just making me think because my husband and his interest, he loves to research the most bizarre things. So he's one of those people who knows a lot about a lot just because he's just interested in one. He wants to know the next thing.
Is he a good trivia partner?
He's so good at Jeopardy. I'm like, okay, how do you know that? That's
I'm
so
not good
weird.
at Jeopardy.
I'm not either. I'm horrible at it. But I bet you my IQ is higher than him.
Yeah.
But we won't tell him I said that.
Don't tell anybody.
So anyway, he researched this guy, Wim Hof.
Yes.
You know him?
Yeah, the Wim Hof
method.
Yeah.
So of course you know him. It makes total sense. But for those who don't know him, he is holds the Guinness World Record for traveling underwater underneath ice and swimming from one place to another for the longest duration. Why somebody would practice doing that, I do not know.
I have no idea
But
either.
the crazy thing is he's doing it without a wetsuit on. So just himself diving in under a glacier and going a really long time. I wish I knew offhand what it was. But what he did in order to practice for that is he changed his breath in order to change his internal body temperature. And so my husband he's somebody who wears flip-flops year-round, even in the cold. I've seen him shoveling in shorts and flip-flops, and I'm like, what are you doing shoveling snow in that? And I'm fine, I'm good, I'm breathing out here. I'm like, okay, do your work, buddy. So I know that he literally will go and practice. He just hiked Mount Whitney, which is the tallest peak in the United States of America. And so he got there, it's like 14,000 elevation from top to bottom.
Wow.
So really insane. And he never practiced. He did not wear flip-flops, which is very rare because he'll go hiking 9-10 miles in flip-flops. It's insane. But he was wearing right? He was wearing board shorts and a tank top, and everybody else is wearing hiking boots.
Gear.
And,
all geared out.
Backpacks. He ran out of water on the way up. Thank God for other people who are generous. But he said the entire time he was just really focused on his breath because obviously immediately out of the car, out of the gate, his heartbeat started going like crazy because you don't ever go from 0 to 14,000 in no time, right? Like that.
Yeah.
And so he just has always been somebody who so advocates for breath work. And he will have my children, even when they are anxious or if something's going on and they're like, can't stop crying or whatever it be, he just gets down on their level and he's just like, breathe with me.
Yeah.
And the first off, the beauty from a mother, I'm just like, you are so sexy right now. I
Absolutely.
love you to the moon because this is amazing. But also
That's so
I notice myself going into the same rhythm of what he's asking them to do.
Mm-hmm.
And when I come into that place, I'm like, okay, everything's going to be okay. And generally speaking, because we do have a bit more control as an adults, we get to that place faster than where the children, I feel like, are, even though they're probably incredibly in tune and we don't even realize it. They're just the ones crying. But it's really amazing what literally the breath alone, without even thinking about all this other mumbo jumbo that might seem like way over somebody's head or even interest level. It's if you can just focus on your breath.
Yes.
What it does to you when you're breathing, when they say when you're breathing through your nose, out through your mouth, when you're running, or don't get cramps, do this. I mean, all of those things take such mental alignment.
Yes.
Even though we can do it when we're not thinking about it.
Yes, it does.
Crazy.
And, not to fall back into bucket number 2 or anything, but I think I will for just a second.
Please.
I had mentioned how people will be inspired to undertake meditation as a practice for several reasons. Sometimes it's for spiritual reasons, as we mentioned. Sometimes it's for stress relief, or physical relaxation, for healing, for better ability to concentrate. There are all sorts of reasons. And I mean, I'd say that the draw has been there. All of that has been a draw for me at one point or another. And I'd say that same thing goes for breath work, right? If you want to do breath work as a self-regulation strategy to manage anxiety or to sort of fire yourself up if you have a more sluggish or depressive type disposition, then there are practices for that. I took a certification with Amy Weintraub. She wrote, I don't know, let's see, Yoga for Depression and Anxiety. I think that might be the name of the book. I've forgotten it. But anyway, I mean, she went through various practices breathing to either activate or to calm / soothe. And so it can be used for that. The thing that I actually really love about it, though, is using it as a way to dismantle unhealthy breathing patterns, because a lot of us I think it's fair to say that we live in a society of chest breathers.
Yeah, interesting.
Our tight clothes, our slumped over postures, right? Like the way that we hold our bodies in space can affect the way that we breathe. I said breathe. Breathe. Gotcha. Breathe. When we're slouched over, that inhibits the range of the diaphragm in the body, and that can compromise the volume of air that we take into our lungs.
Sure, you're like making me sit up in my chair.
Yeah. And, one tip I love sharing with people in workshops or in privates is, hey, look, just check in and notice how you're breathing over the course of the day. When your mind starts running really fast because you're stressed or anxious or you're not present really, right? You're off in a story somewhere other than where you are right now.
Totally.
Notice what happens to your breath. Are you breathing faster? Are you holding your breath? Are you reverse breathing where you actually suck in as you inhale and push your belly out as you exhale? There are all sorts of really funky breathing patterns that people develop as a result of psycho-emotional churning, really.
Sure. That's so interesting. I feel like, and all of it is related, right? We're talking about, like, even last night somebody was talking about gut health related to CBD oil and what the transformation has done for her son who was dealing with a bunch of things. But I find it really interesting that at the end of the day, like, if we can check back in with our body, literally like our physical being, and that being the first place that you start, because I feel like that's a control center that we do have the ability to connect with.
Yes.
A lot of times, because of where we started at the first bucket in the mind, I feel like the mind is way harder to control than my breath would be.
It is.
Because I would be like, hold on, like I can do this and still let my mind run wild, right? Or I don't want to face those things, so I can easily put those away. But when it's my body, and it's no different than like we're going a million miles a minute, America always is, doing all my regular daily tasks. And then the moment I get sick, I'm like, boom, my body is down and I have to stop everything else.
Right. Because
this is the control center that makes all of those other things happen. So I've had a girlfriend who's been sick with the flu the last couple of days, and she's like, gosh, I hate this. And we hate it because, one, we're not in control of our function at that point, but because we've stopped everything else and we're not feeling well in it. I want to stop everything else and feel amazing when I do it. And I think that that's the practice of essentially what meditation is, and getting to that mindfulness space of being like free and at peace and where you are in a comfort zone, instead of always having to work through something traumatic. You do get to the place, and there will be ebbs and flows of your entire life, but I want to live my life so that when I'm able to rest, I'm doing so mindfully that I get to do it enjoyably.
Yeah, mindfully and enjoyably. Ooh, I like it.
Right?
Yeah.
So I just think that that's so interesting, because I truly do believe, like, even concepts of cancer, and I'm no doctor and no expert by any means, but I think if people focused more on how they were breathing, things like that could actually be inhibited.
Yes, and we did start from more subtle, and we are, making our way to, physicality now, or the gross layer of our being, GROSS. Yeah. And, yoga has terminology for all of these different layers or koshas of our being, or coverings, you might call them. And so the thing that's cool about the breath is it's actually the intermediary between the physical body and the mental, emotional body.
It's good.
So, when we practice mindfulness, we're almost practicing top-down regulation. When we're practicing breath work, we're using the body's language to regulate up, to neutralize any sort of mental or emotional distress that we're potentially experiencing at the time. But the cool thing about the breath is that since it is this intermediary between the two levels of our being, and there are 5 levels, I think, in the philosophy of yoga.
Sure.
We don't have to get into all of that. But it's a mirror. It really contains a lot of powerful information.
Really cool.
And that's why I say, check in with your breath.
Yeah.
What's going on in your body? What's going on in your breath? What's going on in your mind? Is there anything that you'd like to do differently in this moment? We have countless opportunities to hit the reset button.
It's so cool. It's so cool. And I think, I don't even know what I intended for this conversation. I try not to go into anything with expectations of just like an opportunity to just be together. I do want you to share, because I know that there's so much to you, to what you bring to your knowledge base is like your heart placement, your life placement. Like you mentioned a couple of places of like what brought you to this, why you are here and who you are. But as you've journeyed through this experience, like what are your, I guess, biggest takeaways? And not from like a high level breathwork mindfulness space, but just like who you are, your identity place.
Yeah, I think that life's a better experience when we are mindful and when we're not resisting it. Yeah, and I think that that's really the moving meditation of life, because it's really easy to get off track. And again, we've got countless opportunities to come back to the present. And it's also tempting at certain times to, fight against life and curse it and resist it when it's not unfolding or happening the way that we want it to. And so I think going back to that flow concept of moving with rather than resisting, it's really important. And I'm not here today to say that I'm some guru, because I'm totally not. I'm like all of the rest of us, going back to that equality plane, right? Yes. But I'd say that that's how I try to live my life. And one other thing I just want to touch on briefly, which answers this question that you raise, is, this idea of meditation and turning inward and developing a peaceful, inwardly flowing mind is so important in the world that we live in today, because so much of what we experience is there's such an external component to it. And, we speak about like all of the comparison traps that are prevalent in our times today. Social media is a hot button topic that comes to mind for a lot of us, right? Because it's like this nonstop at our disposal comparison reel, right? And everybody's doing all the things, and we want to do all the things, and then we get FOMO when we're not doing all the things. Or just to use an example that I think a lot of people can relate to, that when we look outside of ourselves for confirmation and validation of our worth, I think that that's where one of the biggest pitfalls is. I know certainly for me, anytime I've fallen into the comparison rut before, it can be so enticing to forget the truth of who I really am. And so my probably number one value in life is remembering who I truly am every day, plugging back up to that higher reality and engaging in that co-creative process that we talked about earlier, because I believe that inner radiance that we experience when we turn within is so much more luxurious and rich and abundant than anything that we're looking for outside of ourselves. And it fuels me to do that, and it fuels anyone to be able to accomplish, what
being in tune with that's where you come into recognition of like your own passions versus anybody else's, which then sets you on the path of, I want to do this because it fulfills me, which then eventually fulfills all the people around you. Right. And you're not doing it because somebody else told you to, or there's an expectation for you to do so, or because you've achieved some sort of milestone in your life that this is the next step. So I love that. And I feel like of all of the things that you said today, that's like literally the perfect bow on top of the package, because it just is like, if you are able to just be
and connect within,
and
just be and keep it simple. It does not have to be complicated. Our capitalistic society, we've been led to believe that if I get this and I do this and I go there and I meet this person, then everything's going to be magical. And I think that oftentimes so much of it can be streamlined with
the KISS method, we just learned it last night at Core Creatives with the financial guru, is keep it simple, stupid.
Oh yeah, I've heard that. Right? I heard that like back in the day.
It's so good though. Like literally, if we could just stick to that,
absolutely,
it would make life so much less complicated.
I agree. There have been times when I've gotten really willful in my meditation practice over the years, you know, and when I was hitting plateaus in meditation practice, for example, I was like, well, maybe if I do this technique instead of this technique, then I'll feel better. And, you know, at the time my teacher was like, you're trying to avoid something. You're not willing to sit with what is. And, you know, I'd really like complicate things, get myself in a tizzy, and then, you know,
come back
to keep it simple. And I was like, oh, look at all of these fun little obstacle courses my ego just made me jump through. And
that's life though. I love it.
That is life.
So life. And when people, I mean, literally, I'm like,
but that's resistance.
Right? It's like looking at these huge light rings that are on us right now and thinking of like the lion jumping through the flame, right? Is that like, if he just goes through, it's easy, you're done, like his trick is over. But there's so much hesitancy because you're like, how am I going to get around? Am I going to jump over? Am I going to go to the side? Is my hair going to catch on fire? Like, what is it going to do? And meanwhile, like the higher being, whatever it is you want to say, is like, just come this way. Just come this way. Like literally making eye contact with you, and you're like, no, I'd rather not. So it's so at the end of the day, like being able to connect with yourself and who that person is, and ultimately for us, it's whose you are through that, because we are not our own, and whatever that means to anybody, that's your own for the taking. But I feel like when we've talked before, it's like so much more about that spiritual place. And I even before we were getting on this conversation, I was like thinking, okay, like how do you blend, right? We're talking about cultures and ethnicity and different genders and all of that. How do you blend and come to a connectivity point with people? And at the end of the day, it's just like you said, being loved and being known and not being alone. And if you can know who you are, you don't feel alone because you're with somebody who loves you.
Yes, my teacher calls it your inner friend.
Yes, I love that. Gosh, there's
capital I, capital F, inner friend. Yes.
Oh, that makes me so happy because it goes full circle back to this this little girl.
Yes, it does.
And I can literally see myself there, especially with having my little daughter who looks like my mini me anyway.
Yeah.
And just experiencing those times in my life where I just needed a friend.
Yeah.
And we didn't have that person.
Yeah.
So coming alongside them and being that friend to each other, but knowing now and having more empathy for other people, no matter what mask they're wearing, is just being empathetic for people and showing up. And that was where our conversation was before about like, if social media and all of those things went away, what does it come back to? And it comes back to connection.
Totally.
And so all of these, you know, numbers and things that we chase and titles, and none of that matters at the end of the day. It's like, who were you connected to? Who made a lasting impact on you, and who did you make a lasting impact on?
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a motivational speaker who I follow, who I shared this last night at my Core Creatives meeting, is that he, Ed Milet is his name. He's an incredible spiritual man, but just like, he's a motivational coach for really high level achievers. So professional athletes, really, really successful entrepreneurs.
Cool.
And he's talking about how at the end of life, he had this vision that God had created the man that he had intended for Ed Milet to be in heaven. And he wants to get to heaven. And when he meets that person, the best version of himself, everything that God intended, he wants to be the identical twin instead of a stranger. And if we are not working every single day to become the best version of ourselves, and whatever that practice looks like for you, is we are limiting ourselves from the person that we're intended to be.
Yeah. I would just add on to that. Tara Brach actually calls it, what does she call it? Like the self-growth project or something. Okay. I know I'm not saying that right. No, the self-improvement project.
Okay.
And like, I totally agree. I'm all about like, the whole like, what's her name? Carol Dweck, I think it is, like the whole growth mindset movement.
Totally.
And I'm a big proponent of self-growth, self-transformation as well. But I love what Tara talks about, which is the self-improvement project. And I think self-growth is amazing as long as it's done without that critical voice, right? Because the self-improvement project is like, well, you'll be good enough when you get to here. But until then, and we all know that, really, once we make our milestone, then we're like, well, I really want to get here, then I'll be,
1,000%. And we see that sadly on so many suicides and things that happen detrimentally because people get there and you see it and all the things that people aspire to from an American dream standpoint. And that was literally how my entire journey went. Is I quit the American dream and I didn't want the white picket fence. I sold the cars. I sold all the things. I let go of the 2 CEO positions that I had and all the titles so that I could just be and figure out who it was that I was. And ultimately I am 1,000% more happy as a human being than I have been my entire life.
And a human doing something that you
didn't
want to do.
I was doing all these things. It was horrible, but I know that people have this ability and I want so eagerly. So if you're local and you're listening live, hi and welcome, and almost goodbye. But I want you to introduce, how can people get in touch with you? Because I'm sure you do things online as well, but you have a workshop tomorrow.
Yeah, I do. So it's a private event tomorrow. It's actually on self-compassion. But I've received so many inquiries and questions about when is the next workshop. So I will be putting on a workshop on January the 12th. That's a Sunday. Time to be determined. The location is at the Annex, the space where we met, actually. Yes. So stay tuned. It's going to be a workshop that basically covers a lot of the different dimensions that we talked about today: body, breath, mind, heart. And then there are going to be some other opportunities to practice too. Next year, I'll be offering a series on like introductory mindfulness and meditation, and we're going to be covering a lot of things in more depth for several weeks in a row. So that'll be really exciting. And website is currently under development. I've been working on it for a while. As we spoke about evolution earlier, evolve and change. So anyway, that should be published sometime in early Q1 2020. And then, of course, you can find me on Instagram. My handle is empowered_mind_wellness, and my email is Jacqueline@empowered-mind.com.
Thank you so much for being here. I already feel enlightened. I feel like I need to go be quiet, and I get to go pick up my kids. So maybe my next 15 minutes will be really amazing. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for the invite.
Such a joy. I can't wait to practice with you.
I'm excited.
Take me there.
I'm excited to join you. I'm so excited I couldn't make your pork.
Oh, no, it's okay. It's going to be amazing. Our friendship is just starting.
Yes, it is.
So thank you guys for being with us.
Bye.
See you soon.
I'm Tamra Andress. I'm your Fit and Faith host, and I am so excited to just be here to share with you other movers, dreamers, shakers, entrepreneurs, pastors, whatever. If you've got a head and you've got a heart, I'm so excited to explore who that is, whose you are, and discover your wholeness, your health, your wealth, and your joy. I love to exude happiness. I want people to know that this is not, this came with trial. You guys, this came with a lot of effort. This came with a lot of lows and so many highs. And I want us to experience those together. This is a real community of dreamers, and I'm excited to help catapult your calling, your kingdom experience, the purpose of your imprint on the world, wherever, however that is. So come along for the ride. I'm excited to chat with you. Like, comment, review, send me a DM, send me an email. It's me responding, even though I have an incredible team. And so I'm just excited to get to know you. Let's connect, let's create community, and let's walk in our calling.